the Epstein files play some role in this. Epstein was a Mossad agent, and there's no doubt that there's blackmail involved in this in some way or another that we don't fully know. How corrupt can America be? We're plumbing new depths, basically.
Yeah. Jeffrey Sachs asserted on Breaking Points recently that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent. Let's find out why he thinks that. And he also gets into Israel's overall influence on the United States here and why public opinion doesn't exactly matter when it comes to U.S. foreign policy. Let's hear him chime in on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
It starts with the fact that in foreign policy, public opinion plays almost no role in the United States in general. That's true across wars. That's true across almost all of the issues that we have a foreign policy. This is executive branch, largely covert. It's very heavily CIA and national security driven rather than any publicly driven decision making. Congress is pretty much useless across the board in foreign policy and has been for a long time. Of course, the Congress is suborned by the military-industrial complex to begin with, by the military contractors, and then there are the specific issues.
Yeah, he's exactly right. Congress defers to the president on all things war, even though the U.S. Constitution confines the power to declare war to Congress alone. That's in Article 1, Section 8, but it's been that way for a long time. He also makes a good point about the long-lasting power centers of the United States, the lobbying interests. AIPAC, the Israel lobby, the military-industrial complex, the CIA, the FBI, the intelligence apparatus, the NSA, all have a perverted incentive structure to drag us into these wars, to fleece the middle class of their money, get it into the pockets of rich contractors, and, conduct empire building schemes. This is the modern war regime that we're seeing in Washington, D.C. It's why the U.S. is so embroiled in entangling alliances with Ukraine and Israel, trying to basically police the world, but that's putting it lightly. It's trying to, conduct operations that expand hegemony throughout the world. And it's backwards and it's twisted and it's not America first, that's for sure, if your interest is serving the public.
Of Israel. So you mentioned, of course, the biggest one, which is the Zionist lobby, the AIPAC, and others. There's just a tremendous amount of buying of votes and corruption and threats against individual congressmen. I'm sure that the Epstein files play some role in this. Epstein was a Mossad agent, and there's no doubt that there's blackmail involved in this in some way or another that we don't fully know. The CIA-Mossad relationship dates back many, many decades. Mossad does murders on behalf of the CIA. They deeply share intelligence. The CIA is the single most powerful agent of our foreign policy. And so this is not only the Israel lobby, because after all, by the way, the Jewish community is profoundly unhappy with what's happening. Of course, there are Jews that support Israel, but there's a vast community of Jews that is completely aghast.
Yeah, especially those residing outside of Israel. Within Israel, Netanyahu enjoys something like 75% support in many polls, despite all the protests recently. But he's right. Okay, he's right about the CIA and Mossad being in lockstep for a long time, doing each other's bidding, in some ways being indistinguishable. He's also right about the power of the Israel lobby. But I have to disagree with him to some extent if he thinks that Epstein was an agent of Mossad. I think he was more likely an asset of Mossad. And yeah, there's a big difference. If you're an agent, you're literally working under the employment of Mossad, a badge-carrying member, and there's a lot more, a lot more potential for that information to come to light than if you were an asset. If you're an asset, you're kind of doing something like contract work for Mossad, doing their bidding, and, getting paid for it. But I think Epstein was more closely and much more certainly a Mossad asset because he was an access asset. He had ties to Mossad, former intelligence leaders and prime ministers of Israel like Ehud Barak, who stayed at his home for prolonged periods of time. He had ties with Ari Ben-Menashe, who Ben-Menashe was an agent of Mossad and said that Epstein not only admitted to being an asset of Mossad, but that he conducted blackmail operations. So there is a lot of, evidence for blackmail and getting prominent politicians and people of power in precarious situations to use that information for leverage. That's what an access agent does. He also had connections to Douglas Leese and Adnan Khashoggi in the 1980s, and they were involved in arms trafficking operations, including Iran-Contra. So I think it's much more likely that Epstein was an access asset and not an agent.
And disgusted and also reviled at what Israel is doing because Israel claims to do it in the name of world Jewry. That is an obscenity, I would say.
Yeah, what do you think's increasing the anti-Semitism around the world? It's saying that Israel is synonymous with Judaism and then enacting a genocide. That's what's expanding anti-Semitism, by the way.
Israel is doing it in the face of opposition of world Jewry. So this is another element, the CIA Mossad linkages that go quite strongly. They are very powerful in Silicon Valley right now. Palantir is the AI Murder Inc. Company of the world. It does the targeting. We know that Microsoft and many other companies are deeply involved with Israel. There's a lot of money.
Yeah, the Palantir story is the most undercovered story in Washington, if you're asking me. This is a Peter Thiel startup that was funded with its initial seed money from the CIA. In-Q-Tel, that's the CIA's kind of branch of financing originally in 2003, and now Palantir seeks to build a database on individuals that makes the NSA surveillance program look like child's play. They want to aggregate all the data that the NSA has with other departments like the IRS, etc., to build individual databases with individual files on each individual. This is a complete violation of the Fourth Amendment. It's something that a lot of Republicans are just shelving. Some distance on the left are talking about it. Whitney Webb's talking about it. But that is an undercovered story of severe importance, and it deserves more play, especially because of J.D. Vance's close ties with Peter Thiel. He's essentially a child of the Thielverse.
In all of this, the Israeli stock market has been up during this war. So there's a lot of corruption, blackmail, campaign finance, deep state, CIA, Mossad relations. But I have to tell you, saying all of that, it's still shocking. It's still shocking because we don't have genocides before our eyes this way, all recorded day by day, all with the thank you of the Israeli ministers, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, every day explaining that it's a genocide, making no bones about it, being very explicit about it. So your question hangs there even after all of the explanations. It is a puzzle. How corrupt can America be? We're plumbing new depths, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, we sure are. And, the destructive nature of the U.S.-Israeli relationship is off the charts. Whatever you think about Epstein, I just think it's much more likely that he was an asset of Mossad doing dirty work on behalf of Mossad. This child sex trafficking arrangement was essentially tied into a Mossad blackmail scheme. That's, I think, what the most evidence points to. That's what a lot of circumstantial evidence lines up to explaining. It's the most plausible scenario. But The U.S.-Israeli relationship is destructive to the United States. John Mearsheimer has recently said he believes that what Israel's doing right now, in Gaza especially, is, destroying Israel from the inside. You might have a lot of Jewish migration outside of Israel. Israel might move even more to the right, if that's possible, under this Likudnik coalition. And that could spell disaster for Israel. We'll have to see that plan out. But I think Jeffrey Sachs is almost totally right here when it comes to talking about the influences over our government and the foreign policy influences, which is a huge structural incentive structure that benefits perversions, military strikes, proxy wars, etc., caring nothing about Americans, plunging us into debt, feeding and lining the pockets of military contractors, the Raytheons and the Boeings of the world at our expense. And that's what we've grown to know essentially my entire adult lifetime. They know that Americans don't support this, so they know that they have to ramp the propaganda engine up. When it comes to Israel, Israel's just this lone country minding its own business in the Middle East, defending itself. Israel has a right to defending itself. The Palestinians shout from the river to the sea. Let's not mention the fact that phrase and that idea is in the Likud charter from the 1970s also, by the way, in the opposite direction. Talking about how Iran wants to wipe Israel off the map. When backed into a corner, it clearly didn't try to wipe Israel off the map. Actually, Israel just wanted a regime change operation there. There's just so much propaganda that all of this is because of Hamas, and Hamas is Iran's proxy, even though, let's not mention that, Hamas is Netanyahu's proxy. Netanyahu fed and financed Hamas for years and years and years because he thought it would destabilize the Palestinian Authority and make it impossible to enact a two-state solution. But that's what they're doing. This is genocide. This is expanding the borders of Israel into the West Bank settlements for the dream and aspirations of Greater Israel. The U.S. is forced to finance it somehow. Somehow our communities are not as important as this Greater Israel project, this foreign project, spearheaded and propagandized by a foreign lobby within our government, AIPAC, that doesn't have to register under FARA like any other foreign lobby. You think they would allow that kind of stipulation to, say, a Russian lobby? No. If there was such a thing, you'd immediately be branded a traitor. But when it comes to Israel, there's a special carve-out, as always. Just like their secret nuclear weapons program is a special carve-out. But let me know what you think. Let me know down below. Do you agree with Jeffrey Sachs? Was Jeffrey Epstein a Mossad agent, Mossad asset? What is the most twisted part of the U.S.-Israeli relationship? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Breaking Points. Really appreciated this interview. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel. And in return, I'll give you access to all of my videos that are members only now before they go live to the general public on my channel. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.